One more player interview to round out this month of August. Today, Antonio Daniels, former NBA guard for a long time, now a broadcaster for the Pelicans, is going to join us to talk about Rick Carlisle and what his role will be coaching the Pacers this year. We'll get to it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News. And today, the final podcast of August here from Locked On Pacers, we're joined by one more player for the month, ex-NBA guard Antonio Daniels, 13-year pro, 1999 NBA champion. Antonio Daniels, long career with many franchises. But today's show isn't just about talking to Daniels. In fact, we don't talk about the Pacers, or he didn't play for the Pacers or have any relation to the franchise at all during his playing days. Instead, we talk about Rick Carlisle a lot, because today's show, I wanted to bring him in for his expertise on coaching, because something I wanted to do was talk about Rick Carlisle's role for the Pacers this year in coaching this team. Not that his role as a coach is drastically different than any other year. He's still the head coach, but coaching a winning team and a developing team comes with a little different skills for a coach. And I think Antonio Daniels, who played on some crummy teams as a rookie and some great teams in San Antonio, mixed in with some others in the middle, would have good insight on that sort of thing. So we talked about Rick Carlisle a lot and his role with this coming team, as well as Ben Mathurin. Antonio Daniels was a 4th overall pick, Mathurin 6th, about what kind of expectations to set for the rookie, and talked about things like that. But I want to start by myself talking about Rick Carlisle and the role he will be playing for the Pacers this year. Obviously, again, as the head coach, but it is a different job in front of him this year than last year, when the Pacers came in with expectations to bounce back from the poor Nate Bjorkgren season, to win, to have this core connect under a new coach. There was a lot of chatter from fans about he didn't sign up for a rebuild. They're going to try to be good. And that just didn't happen, right? The job he has in front of him this year is interesting because they were trying to do something else last year that didn't happen. If you recall, the Pacers played, I think, the Heat in a TNT game last year, and Jared Greenberg, an announcer on TNT, said that Carlisle told him before the game that he didn't necessarily sign up for a rebuild. But the Pacers were terrible, and they had to rebuild. Terrible compared to expectations, and they were forced to rebuild. They were forced to pivot mid-season, and I think that was obviously the right move. But I understand why, that may not have been exactly what Rick signed up for. But that said, there's a lot of thinking about what he did and didn't sign up for. That doesn't really matter. I think his skills suit winning teams, losing teams, in the middle, bridging teams, whatever. Rick Carlisle's coaching acumen obviously is well-rounded. He's coached a bunch of variety of teams, championship teams, 24-win teams in Dallas. He's kind of done all of them. But the thing he's really good at, the thing he really likes, is being a teacher. And I think that applies to teams in both contexts. A winning squad, a losing squad, a developing squad, whatever. And I think this year, teaching is going to be a very interesting and key part of the Pacers and their growth as a team, because obviously they have a bunch of young players who need to learn how to play together. They need to grow together, learn skills from, an ex-player coach, but also a coach who's won a championship, about how to win, how to play together, how to develop certain skills, how to be put in positions to succeed, how to be a team, right? These are a lot of new faces all together and young faces all together at once. I think his teaching style will be good on that team. And I think that teaching style can be good in a lot of contexts. On a good team, it's teaching sets, it's teaching consistency, it's teaching preparedness on a game-to-game basis, things that still matter for younger teams, but aren't necessarily the key things you hone in on every single game. But I still think being a teacher and loving that aspect of coaching is key on any team. And that's why Rick has been able to coach successfully good, great, and some crummy teams. And those crummy teams weren't crummy for that long, right? Dallas dipped down in the late years of Dirk, and obviously they scooped up Luka. Some roster context is important to discussing this, but he did a good job of, pivoting from one system to another that catered to another system, that for a different star, for a different style, and still developing some other players along the way, right? Dallas went from 30 wins to 20 to 30 to 40, and boom, they're right back in the picture for the postseason in just a few years, rebuilding in a whole new system around a whole new player. And he developed some talent along the way. He had this rep a long time ago, kind of pre the Luka era of, not necessarily relying on young players enough. And I think he kind of kicked that in those late years in Dallas, when guys like Yogi Ferrell and Dorian Finney-Smith and Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber and Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic all sort of grew together and took Dallas from this, team switching from one era to the next into a good team. And lo and behold, that's sort of the situation the Pacers are in now. So I understand that Rick Carlisle maybe is apt suited for really good teams, but I think he also is well suited for a young and developing team. And I think he can do very well in the coaching role he won't have this year. And I think he's really going to enjoy it. But that's just my opinion on it. Antonio Daniels played in the NBA for a long time and has much better opinions on these things than I do, because he was coached by coaches on teams that ended up winning 19 games. And he was also coached by Greg Popovich teams that ended up winning the championship. I think his insight on this was really interesting. I also enjoyed the perspective he provided on Bennedict Mathurin, what his season with the Pacers is going to look like, and things like that. It's a really awesome conversation. And big thanks to Antonio for joining me today. Before we hop in with him and chat about the Pacers and Rick Carlisle, I want to talk to you guys about BetOnline.net, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. You can find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews of every league: Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NFL, combat sports, esports, even golf, all over at BetOnline.net, who continue to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They've got you covered. Head over to that website today or on your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action, including the Colts opener against the Texans. They're favored by 10 points in that game coming up in just a few weeks. You can get those lines over at betonline.net, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Now, let's bring in ex-NBA guard Antonio Daniels. 13-year pro Antonio Daniels here to talk some Pacers and some Rick Carlisle with us today. Antonio, you had an interesting thing in your career that I wanted to ask you about with regards to Pacers head coach Rick Carlisle, and that is in your first year with the Grizzlies, you were on more of a rebuilding team that was developing talent before going to the Spurs that were, chasing a championship. How does the direction of a team kind of influence the way a coach coaches a team, and how should Rick Carlisle approach this Pacers team that's in more of a building stage this year?
Well, first, I'll say I don't think I'm in any place whatsoever to tell Rick Carlisle, a NBA championship coach, how he should approach his job. This NBA, this generation is different. So coaches that have been blessed to coach in this league for a lengthy amount of time have been a part of the change. So they've seen it from the 90s through the 2000s, early 2000s, and now 2022. I think things are different when you're rebuilding, though, as opposed to being on a team where you are coaching for championships. Your patience level has to be different. Your understanding has to be different. Now, when I say patience, I'm not talking about in the effort category. I'm talking about in the results category. You know, the Indiana Pacers, because they're in the middle or in the beginning of a rebuild, no one expects them to go out and win 50 or 60 games. But Coach Carlisle will expect them to, every time they take the floor, to expect to win. I can guarantee you that. Similar to Greg Popovich. When I was in San Antonio, it didn't matter who played. If Tim Duncan was playing, if David Robinson was playing, if they weren't playing, if Avery Johnson wasn't playing, Steve Kerr, it didn't matter. He still expected to win the game, and he still coached with the same intensity that he did if those guys were playing. So I think that's kind of what you can expect out of Rick Carlisle. You're not going to you're not going to see any lack of his passion. It's not like because they're not winning games or because the expectation's not there that he's just going to sit on the bench and allow guys to do what they want to do. That's not who Rick Carlisle has ever been.
When you were a younger player in your first seasons, what was really helpful for you from a coaching standpoint in getting better and in improving and fitting into a new team environment? Because the Pacers right now have a lot of new players, and of the 15 guys they have signed right now, 11 of them are 25 or under. So they're going to have to figure out how to get those guys to blend and play well. What was helpful for you as a young player that the Pacers could potentially implement or help with their young team this season?
Really understanding the power of relationships. How important it is to actually get along and like each other. How important it is to get started as soon as possible. Like, training camp starts the final week of September. But this isn't the NCAA where you have rules put in place that says you're not allowed to report at this particular time. If you have an opportunity to get together a month, 2 months before training camp opens, do that. Take advantage of the time that you're given, especially when you're a young team. Because when you get together early, it gives you an opportunity to learn each other. You know, if I'm Halliburton, I can learn where this particular player likes the ball, how he likes the ball, what his skill set is, you know, so on and so forth. Get the rookies implemented into what NBA life is all about. Don't wait till the last minute to get together, get an opportunity to grow that chemistry and camaraderie when you're blessed with the opportunity to get that done a month or two in advance. Nothing's better in this league than hitting the ground running once training camp starts.
Do you have any sort of relationship with Rick Carlisle? Do you have any insight on what he'll be like for this team?
I tell you what's wild. My junior year in high school, Rick Carlisle actually came to Bowling Green, which is where I went to college, and worked me out the summer of my junior year. It was wild because he's really good friends with, at the time, my head coach was Jim Larinaga. So I got an opportunity to know Rick Carlisle. Now being the color analyst for the New Orleans Pelicans, my first 2 games that I ever did as a color analyst was with the Dallas Mavericks 4 years ago when Derek Harper's mom passed. So I subbed in for Derek Harper for a few games. I went out to dinner with Rick Carlisle in Portland. So I have a pretty good relationship with Rick. Love him. Love him. I told him at one point that I was thinking about getting into coaching. He gave me some advice. We talked on the phone for a little while. The thing is, like, Rick Carlisle, and I know this sounds very simplistic. Rick Carlisle's Rick Carlisle. He doesn't pull any punches. You know, who he is who he is. So when he tells you as a coach, this is what he expects of you as a player, that's not going to change. So he's not going to tell you something on Monday, then tell you something different on Wednesday, and tell you something different on Friday. What he tells you on Monday is a part of building culture that he will hold you accountable to for the entire season, or as long as he's tenured in Indiana as a head coach.
He was never your coach in the NBA, but he was in that Bowling Green setting. What were kind of your impressions of him as a coach and the way he was a teacher? And something to that is he played in the NBA. How much did that, him being a player, help you listen to him and kind of get feedback from what he was saying?
I'll tell you this. At the time, obviously being in college, I knew absolutely nothing. So everything that he said, I listened to. Everything he said, literally. Dribble the ball like this, lower your center of gravity, on your jump shot, do this. When you cross over, do whatever it may be. I was taking in all that I possibly could because of the knowledge and experience that he had. I'll say this. I'm a firm believer that role players in this league, and Rick Carlisle was a role player. Role players in this league make the best coaches. No discredit to the greats of this league. And the reason that I feel role players make the best coaches in this league is because they can relate to everybody up and down that bench. You know, so if it's a guy that started, Rick Carlisle has started at a point in his career. Rick Carlisle has come off the bench and been a 6th man at some point in his career. Rick Carlisle has played in a situation where his minutes weren't consistent. Rick Carlisle's been on really good teams and he's been on subpar teams. So there's nobody on that roster that he can't relate to. That's why I feel like some of the best coaches are role players, because this NBA, today's NBA in 2022-23 is about relating to your players. I don't care what offensive and defensive schemes that you have put in place. If your players feel like that you can't relate to them, vice versa, it's going to change things. If your players feel like they can relate to you, that they can speak to you, that you're speaking their language, they will run through a wall for you.
I want to ask you about Pacers rookie Bennedict Mathurin really quickly. He's their highest draft pick in Indiana since the 1980s. He's 6th overall pick. You yourself were a very high draft pick. What kind of advice would you give to him, and what kind of pressure do you feel like is on a young player when the Pacers haven't drafted a guy this high in years, if there is?
I don't think there's much pressure on him. Like that's exactly. It sounds crazy to say, but that's exactly what I wouldn't tell him. Don't put pressure on yourself. Just work. Just work. You know what your skill set is. You know what your talent is. You know what your confidence is. And what I would tell him is, if there's one thing that you can take from college to the pros, that is the most difficult thing to translate and take from college to the pros, take your confidence with you. Take it with you. Because what you see when guys come from college to the NBA, it's very easy to talk a game, But a lot of guys leave their confidence in college. Guilty. I'm speaking from experience. I know how difficult that is. You can get to this level and who you were in college get lost at this level of NBA athleticism, the speed of the game, being enamored by the lights and the Michael Jordans and Kobe Bryants and all of these greats that you get an opportunity to play against. That same confidence that you had in college, take that confidence or try and take that confidence with you to the next level in the NBA. But don't put pressure on yourself. You did a lot to get here in the first place. You're one of a million. You're one of a million to actually get to this level. You belong here. Now go ahead and excel.
Rick Carlisle talked to me and a couple other reporters earlier this summer about one of his favorite things as a coach is being a teacher, right? He talks about that, and the draft workout process is something he really enjoyed. So for a rookie like Bennedict Mathurin, how much do you feel like that skill of Rick's and that something he likes can be good for their relationship as they grow together in Indiana?
I think that's great. Anytime you have a coach that has a teaching mentality, I think it's great for young players. And this is why when you look at certain rebuilding situations, when you look at San Antonio with Rick Popovich and what's going on down here in San Antonio, Rick Carlisle and what's going on right now in Indiana, it's a great opportunity to teach. And I'm going to be honest with you, you might not be winning games, but it's fun for you. It kind of rejuvenates you as a coach, because when you're coaching in situations with veterans that know it all, they get it, a lot of times I feel like as a coach, that can be draining. That can be emotionally and mentally draining. When you have young players whose eyes are wide open and they're hanging on every word that you say because they want to learn, they want to soak in all the knowledge that you have as a coach, as a player, as a championship coach, hear about your experiences and so on and so forth. I feel like as a coach, that kind of gives a bolt of energy or a rejuvenation.
Last one from me, since you regard yourself, what do you think of Tyrese Halliburton and what he could be one day in the NBA?
Love him. I interviewed him this summer on my SiriusXM show, and I love his mentality. I love the way he thinks. When I interviewed him, one of the things he talked about was when the schedule comes out and the schedule has been released, the first game that he's going to look at, obviously, is the Sacramento Kings. That tells me what his mentality is right there. That tells me right there. But I like him because he is a long, lanky, traditional point guard, which is very rare in today's NBA. You know, a lot of times you have shooting guards that are playing point guards, you have lead guards, but he has a facilitating mindset. He has a mindset to involve his teammates first. And anytime you have a guy like that, your organization moving forward is in good hands.
Looking forward to watching him play this year. Antonio, thank you for the time. Much appreciated.
For sure. Appreciate you, Tony.
Big thanks to Antonio for joining the show. I thought that was a really fun and fantastic conversation on the job Rick Carlisle has in front of him this season. It's going to be fascinating to see how the Pacers develop in this new era as they transition from a team that is trying to win to a team that maybe is, again, trying to win, but not necessarily, is in more of a development mode than in years past. So hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. Tomorrow, last day of August, I'm taking my last day off of the year, and then September starts. We're back to 5 days a week. No more days off on Locked On Pacers. And we're in season preview mode. This episode, sort of a season preview from the coaching perspective. We'll get into some player season preview stuff in some future episodes. Some other stuff I want to talk about this week is going to be about when the Pacers might next make the playoffs, how guys fit with Tyrese Halliburton. I think those are going to be the topics for the rest of this weekend. Some moves the Pacers can still make this summer because there's still some stuff floating out there. The Russell Westbrook stuff is still floating out there. We'll talk about that on Thursday. So still some interesting topics to come before we kind of pivot into the positional season previews and things like that. So a lot of fun content coming here on Locked On Pacers as we pivot into September. Media Day, less than a month away. Training camp, less than a month away. It's all coming here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. So thank you guys a ton for listening. Hope you had a great day, and we will see you soon.